Hello, we are The Promise of Love, bringing to you The Love Effect.
A podcast that brings you real insight and real stories about real relationships.
It's not impossible. I've heard about this happening before.
Reconciling with your ex after divorce. How is that even possible? And why would you want to do that?
Well, first, let's take a look at what it means to reconcile, and then why, and then how. So you see, reconciling with your ex, it could mean a number of different things.
And what are those?
Well, you know what? At first, most people will think about getting back together with your ex and remarrying. That is one form of reconciling. And I've seen that happen before.
Yeah, I have too.
I don't see it very often.
No.
But
it is possible.
It is possible. Now, another form of reconciling is just being friendly to each other. And whenever I say being friendly to each other, that means being proactive about doing nice things.
Okay.
When you see a friend about to go in the wrong direction, you help that friend out.
Sure, why not?
Whenever a friend needs help, you help that friend out.
Yes.
And even if that friend is going to need help that they don't see yet, you come and help out that friend.
Okay.
Now, sometimes as ex-spouses, we kind of like to sit back and watch them fail and take some sort of enjoyment over that. Yeah. And that's not right.
No.
But it's natural.
Yeah, but it's not right.
It's not right. But what if? What if you could elevate yourself above that and always take the high road and help your ex?
Because that's the right thing to do.
That's the right thing to do. And I'm not necessarily saying go overboard. I think if the two of you have decided to live separate lives and be independent of each other, then there should be a clean break in those dependencies. But that does not mean that you have to stop being friendly to your ex. And then the third one, I have seen this very rarely, but it is possible. The extended family concept.
What is that?
So, I actually had a client once who she had remarried, her ex-husband had remarried, and the two extended families would actually get together for holidays. They would have Thanksgiving together, they'd have barbecues together in the summer for like 4th of July, what have you, and everybody got along.
That's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
And that is a form of reconciliation. It is possible to get there. And so the question becomes, what form of reconciliation, one, would you like? And two, what's possible? And so there is the what is reconciliation question right there. So why?
Yeah, why?
Why reconcile?
Why get back together?
And that's really the one I'm going to key in on. The other two, being friendly, the extended family, which is another form of being friendly, just to have good relations with your ex sets you on another level. And it's really the right thing to do if the two of you are, both of you. It takes maturity on both sides to do that. Mm-hmm. But here we are going to focus on what would it be like to get back together. Well, why? You might have to ask yourself, was it an emotional breakup? If it was an emotional breakup, then you might have to ask yourself, did you break up? Did you divorce for the right reasons?
Okay.
I mean, there are times when your spouse is really going to hurt you, vex you, and that pain is emotional. And sometimes you go down the slippery slope of hurting each other emotionally until you land on divorce and you wonder, what were we really fighting about? Well, it's because he did that or because she did this. But if you removed that incident that made everything come crumbling down, if you removed that incident, was it a good marriage? And if it was, maybe there's a reason to reconcile and get back to that beautiful marriage that once was. Another thing to ask yourself is, was it a clean break? In other words, did you divorce for God-recognized reasons?
And what are God-recognized reasons?
Well, there are two things. In one case, if you divorce because of sexual immorality.
Okay.
We recognize that as infidelity.
Okay.
If you have divorced for that, God recognizes the divorce.
Okay.
And that is in Scripture. If you divorce for any reason other than sexual immorality, then assuredly you commit adultery when you marry somebody else.
Okay.
And whenever you commit adultery, you actually cause someone else, the person that you're in relation with, to commit adultery as well. So if you ever want to be true to your next love interest, spouse, you owe it to them to make sure that your first marriage was closed out cleanly. Another way is if you are abandoned by a non-believer.
Okay.
And abandoned doesn't just mean physically leaving. The scripture actually boils down to if your non-believing spouse tore apart your marriage. If they have left the marriage, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually, then you are not bound by that marriage. Now, if one of those two things didn't happen, a lot of times people will just say, we had irreconcilable differences. That's the old term. These days, they say the marriage was unsupportive. And literally, that goes down as a legal explanation as to why this marriage didn't work.
Really?
It really, truly. And just because this couple didn't like each other, they fell out of love, they didn't want to work with each other anymore, that becomes a valid reason for our court system to accept the dissolution of the marriage. But God may not recognize what you did. And so if that's important to you, then you owe it to your next love interest to make sure that your first marriage was closed out properly.
And 3, that's a complete break. What does that mean?
Well, a complete break, as opposed to a clean break.
Yeah.
A complete break is asking, have you severed your soul tie with your spouse? Now, most people see soul ties as forming because of sexual intercourse between two people.
Okay.
But I say, in fact, I know, I've experienced soul ties forming over emotional closeness. I got very emotionally close to this one person, and even if we've never had sex, I feel this soul tie with them.
Okay.
I feel this love, this bond that is not severed by time or distance. So if you have a soul tie with your spouse, which you probably do, you do need to go through a process of severing that soul tie so they're not still on your mind and in your heart whenever you're with your next love interest, your next spouse. Now, I will say this. Sometimes the trauma of the divorce process, or even the events leading up to divorce, sometimes that trauma is enough to sever a soul tie. I can say that most assuredly because, well, just from experience, let's say that. But if that has not happened, there are some steps that you can go through that we do outline in the 5 steps to find true love. There are steps that you can go through to sever the soul tie with an ex-girlfriend, an ex-boyfriend, an ex-spouse, so that you are spiritually free to pursue true love in the days, months, years to follow.
Oh, that sounds wonderful, honey. So, if you listen out there, you need to go.
Definitely. So then you might ask, if I've decided that I do want to get back together with my spouse, and I've looked at the reasons why, and I say, you know what, I can understand why. This is not just I'm not just doing it because they appear to be low-hanging fruit. Sometimes your ex appears to be accessible and easy, and all of a sudden you're feeling lonely, and so you want to get back together with your ex for the mere reason that they're available.
So you went over the what, you went over the why, so now it's the how.
How? Well, this goes back to, first of all, it goes back to swallowing your pride and apologizing. You know,
Which can be very difficult.
it can be very difficult because whenever you get to that point of divorce, you want to feel justified in the decision. And while you may feel justified, that validation that you're giving yourself may be unsupportive of reconciling. And if you had a good thing, except for this incident, except for this one issue, if it is something that can be worked through, your pride could be the only thing in the way of making that happen. So consider, if you can, swallow your pride, push that down. That would be the biggest show of love that you could bring to the table. And then you got to take ownership of your contribution to how things went. Now, even if they're the ones that did wrong, if you can go back and say, I can see how I contributed to that. I can see how I was a factor, maybe even just a catalyst to what happened. It does not give them a pass on what they did. You're never, ever, ever justifying what they did. But you can say that I understand my role in the process. Because if you can understand your role in the process, then you two have a really good shot at not repeating that process, of not repeating that incident. Now, of course, that's dependent on the other person as well. I mean, just because you're willing to stay out of troubled waters, to stay out of the danger zone, if you will, they have to be willing as well.
So it has to be a two-way street, not just one way.
Oh, definitely.
Understood.
And the third thing that you got to do on this is pray. I mean, you got to pray fervently. You got to pray hard. You're not going to be able to do this alone. There's going to have to be some divine help.
That's the best help there is.
It is. And sometimes sometimes we feel so embarrassed because, God, I know you don't like divorce, and I divorced, and so why would you help me? But God's forgiveness towards us, His grace towards us, is more than we can understand. But sometimes it takes that step towards Him to receive that grace from Him. It's not that we're having to earn His grace, but it's just showing that we want His grace. And if we can do that, if you can do that, then you will not be condemned for the divorce decision. In fact, bouncing back from that could be a path to a greater relationship with Him than ever before.
That's wonderful.
But you got to be careful, though. You got to be careful that you do not endorse your ex-spouse's wrongdoings. If your ex did something that was completely heinous, your efforts to reconcile could endorse what they did as acceptable. Let's say, for example, he was physically abusive.
Okay.
And you got out of that marriage because you were getting hurt and you feared for your life.
Yeah.
And then you remove yourself from the marriage, you go through a process of healing, and you look at the love that you had before the abuse started, and you say to yourself, I want to reconcile. Depending on how you go back, it could be a justification to your ex-husband that, yeah, she actually liked that abuse. She actually liked the way I was treating her. She said, by coming back, she's showing me that it was okay and that she's ready for more. It could be interpreted that way, so you have to be very careful about how you return.
Yes, and that person needs to be healed also.
Yes, they do. On the flip side, let's say she was cheating a lot, and he divorces her because of her infidelity. And then, after some healing, he comes back and says, while we were apart, I realized that I really love you, and I forgive you, and I want to come back. I want us to work this out. That, if it's not done with the utmost care, it could come across as, you know what, it doesn't matter who you sleep with, as long as you're married to me, I'm okay with that. She could take that as a pass as to, well, okay, I can walk all over him like that. So both men and women can behave this way. We just have to be very careful about the message that you bring whenever you seek reconciliation. What you did was not okay. It's not acceptable. How I reacted to it was not okay. It's not acceptable. But if we can put those things behind us and make sure that we don't do things like that again, maybe even take some precautions, some accountability to ensure that these things do not happen again, I think we're better together than we are apart. But can you get there? That's a big question.
Huge.
So while you are single again, you should take a moment to regroup. Now, don't reconcile for the reason that your ex is familiar and attainable. Go through the Hope and Healing module of the 5 Steps to Find True Love online course, and then study steps 1 and 2.
Then, if you decide to reconcile, you know you'll be doing it for the right reasons.
So check it out at hope.stepstofindtruelove.com.
We do not encourage or discourage reconciliation. But we do suggest that you consider the points in this podcast to help you decide what to do. At this point, both paths, going back and going forward, are going to be an uphill climb. Make sure you're making that climb for the right reasons.
Hey, thanks for tuning into The Love Effect. Respectfully, we ask you to hit that subscribe button to help us keep this going. And if you'd really like some detailed guidance on how to find and confirm true love, come visit us at stepstofindtruelove.com. That's www.stepstofindtruelove.com. Blessings to you.